So it's my real honest pleasure to be here with a good friend of mine, Leigh Blackall, who I've known for years, but actually only met last year. And Leigh is from Dunedin, New Zealand, from the magical place. And he told me he didn't want a long introduction and that he's going to do a seat of the pants presentation here. But if you know Leigh's writing and if you've heard him ask a question in the presentation, you know he's not going to pull a single punch, and that's why I like him. So without any further ado, Leigh Blackall.
Thanks, Al. Thanks everyone for showing up. It's always good to have a semi-full room. It's horrible to have no one in the room. Yeah, Seat of the Pants is really it because I've been quite busy touring around, seeing a bit of America, and haven't fully prepared a nice show, and want to do photos and all that sort of stuff. But it's going to go straight off the blog here, which is originally from the Wiki. So if you write down that URL, if you don't already know it, just leighblackall.blogspot.com. You'll get the links out to what I'm going to talk about, and links out to stuff that I forget to talk about. I plan to talk about 4 stories to do with open education and practices, open educational resources and practices. The 4 models that you form will make those stories possible. The policy and support practices that we've set up at Otago Polytechnic to make those models possible. And then my recent questioning and crisis of faith in terms of open educational resource and stuff like that. So the experience over the last 3 years has led me to greatly question the whole direction that we're going in. And that will just be open questions for you guys to consider. Stephen yesterday was presenting and raised an issue which I agree with, is that there's been very little talk of methods of assessment in the open education discussion so far, given some of our prevalence to work inside formal institutions of which assessment and accreditation is really all we're worth. Okay. I think, on reflection though, I'm going to skip the stories and talk about the models first, given it's the title of the presentation, and just go straight to that. And then the stories will make more sense then. We generally have 4 models. The first of which, and they don't really neatly break into these 4 models, some across all 4. The first of which, I just referenced this one here. Apple's just command click to get a new tab, yeah? This is a facilitating online course. It was inspired by Dave Wiley's online course. It's an introduction to copyright. Copyright related to open education. He used a wiki. This is obviously a wiki, and he used a course schedule. And basically, that is all of the information that somebody who will be taking this course needs to know on one page, on one load. No clicks, no anything, just all on one page. And the schedule is sequential, breaks up into topics, and we try to keep it somewhere like 10 weeks, short course. The assignments are all there, everything is there, and as much as possible we make the communication open also. There's no learning management system here, there's no login, there's no secret little communication channel, everything's open. All the participants set up a blog and respond to each topic as we go through. And we try, as facilitators in the course, try to see the cross dialogue and stuff. Most people who take this course have never set up a blog before, so we have to deal with technical issues as well along the way. Okay, that's the first model. The stories, the success stories, I'll talk about referring to that just after I get to the other models, if that's all right. And I don't really think clearly while I'm talking, so if there's anything that you need to ask to clarify, please do it then and now. Okay. There are other models, just for your reference there. Flexible learning, composing educational resources are others, and obviously they focus on teacher training and professional development as the student group, but we have other courses in the Polytechnic that are starting to follow this model, particularly in horticulture, tourism, and business. Okay, free and open instruction. Like I said, they don't clearly, oh, I forgot to click the command button there, but they don't clearly separate some of them across. It was about 2 years ago I went up to the cooking department who trained chefs, trades and chefing, and they were interested about using video to complement their classes, and I was sort of lobbying them to think about publishing their videos onto YouTube. Surprisingly to me, that took a fair bit of lobbying, actually. They wanted to set up their own video server, or they wanted to use their own internal server and things like that. But now they've used YouTube. Now, they're not completely open. They're open in terms of their method is open. The method for cooking whatever these things are is open, but the ingredients are not. So they still have a semi-commercial perspective, and personally I try to challenge that, but as a result they don't talk to me much anymore because I'm always challenging them. But at least their videos are on YouTube. And currently we're doing a study now looking at things like this. 43,000 views with that many star ratings, how many comments, response rates, trying to estimate how many of those are market specific to the New Zealand context and things like that, trying to relate it to the marketing department who so far have not a clue about social media marketing. So that is another model. We have chainsaw videos on LibTV and archive.org. We have hand tool maintenance, a number of others, but I'm not thinking clearly. Right. Okay, free and open content. This one was the first we did. That, again, took a lot of lobbying. We had a staff member who authored the textbook in our vet nursing program. It came to us because she was using Microsoft Word, and this textbook was already huge. Images were breaking apart, and the formatting was going to crapper. And so I suggested to her that she start using a wiki, and she'd never heard of a wiki, so she went and talked to somebody else. A year later, I tried another way to influence her by talking to the woman who she did trust to say, wiki, and we have a wiki. Now, this lady knows how to edit the wiki, but that hasn't sold her on the whole other package, the whole social media stuff. She knows about the wiki. Notice that it's Wiki Books. It's not Otago Polytechnic wiki. And notice the YouTube videos for Otago Polytechnic videos. So there's a bit of a theme there I'm going to talk about later. When we successfully created the Wiki Books community featured it as a featured book, which gave a lot of uplift to the teacher. We formatted it to PDF and put it to lulu.com, which is that self-publishing, print-on-demand book. Now, this is where we fumbled the ball. That book obviously sells quite well. The wiki is accessible. We would like to know how it correlates. They are selling the book very well. Her head of department came in, and the profits go to the department rather than the author. I personally would have liked to have seen it go to the author. The teacher, considering our institution acknowledges the copyright and ownership of individual authors now rather than the institution. That would have been good, and that would have probably influenced others in our Polytechnic to follow this route of production, those who are interested in producing resources. The Sustainable Business course that we're setting up is based around a standard business plan, but we're bringing in triple bottom line accounting, we're bringing in some New Zealand resources. We've negotiated copyright release from those government agencies and business support agencies to compile on the same model, to author in Wiki Books, to produce a printout and print-on-demand book, and to follow that schedule, that Wiki schedule course. And just hold on, because I'm still going to get back to those stories that sort of describe how this works for actual people doing the courses. Free and open programs. Okay, this, when we first started using the wiki, was my first approach, heavily inspired by, I've got a bad link there, so let me just go back to that other one, same model. Okay, good, horticulture. Notice now we're on Wiki Educator. When I first started looking at wikis, I first went to Wikiversity and started putting some courses there, course materials, resources, started putting in the course, if you would like to formally enroll in this course, contact the Otago Polytechnic course. Now some people, one or two in the Wikiversity community, took offense at that, at marketing an institutional attack on Wikiversity. So I was getting heat from the Wikiversity, some people in the Wikiversity platform, plus heat from my IT department, saying, why are you using external platforms when they don't even know how to set up a wiki, probably never even heard of a media wiki, but they're still challenging me about using external things. So I quit that and went to Wiki Educator. Wiki Educator was propped up by Commonwealth of Learning, had solid funding and solid institutional support. So that was good because then I could walk into our leadership team and say, Commonwealth of Learning have put up this wiki, and they go, okay, go and use that. And so that Commonwealth of Learning, and specifically the Wiki Educator community, has built up a community around institutionalized teachers, and they speak the same language that I'm working in at this point in time. This is about a year ago. The horticulture is one example. I was going to say that the model, I'm going to need to use a pen, followed the old learning object, shareable learning object theory. For those who are around before, that's a woeful idea, or no, woeful implementation, good idea. And it didn't turn out here, it didn't work here either. It's not working here either. Is that we set up, okay, we looked at the, New Zealand has the competency standards. I think Canada does as well. It's sort of like assessment guides. So this is how you start a lawnmower, and they go through all the steps of how to safely start a lawnmower, and that's used to assess somebody in the industry on that they know how to safely start and maintain a lawnmower. Okay, so we look at that. We look up that competency, unit of competency, and then we build, and then we put that on the wiki, and we make it human readable. So rather than say unit standard 45096 NZQA blah blah blah, we just call it what it is, starting a lawnmower, and just sort of strip away all that so it's human readable, understandable. From that, so that's one of the primary pages. So let's call that starting a lawnmower. Okay, from that, it has each of the, this is where assessment comes in, by the way. Each of the assessment criteria in there. And what we produced are 2 subpages to the wiki. So that's a directory down from the front page of this particular unit, starting a lawnmower. And we had activities, just a list of activities. And here, a library of resources. And the idea was to get the librarians up on the old internet idea and help us find good, open, copyright-free resources that we can list in here that help people understand how to start various types of lawnmowers and et cetera, et cetera. That didn't work straight away. This is working though. But, and these are subpages. So the idea was that these activities would be, like starting a lawnmower safely. The activity might simply be identify safety gear about lawnmowers, steel cap boots and ear protection and eyeglasses and things like that. That might only activities identify those and some creativity. And that's the sheet. Now the problem with all this then is one, the horticulture teacher, who is literally somebody straight out of industry, who's been looking at botanic gardens, and suddenly been thrust into a teaching role, has no teacher training, and has never heard of a wiki. And I'm talking about wikis, substructures, and all that sort of stuff, on the belief that teachers ought to know how to do their own photocopy. This being today's photocopy. Yeah, I was wrong. That's taken 2 years for that teacher with available time to semi-understand how that works. Whereas the other wiki structure, just a one-page schedule. This is what we're doing. Easy to understand, they're using that model now. So it kind of disappoints me because I think this model has legs, because this page here might relate to a Canadian unit of competency quite literally. And so you just relate the two, and with it come the library of resources and the activity sheets, and the teachers who teach the 2 courses who understand this model might simply see it. So was the idea with shareable learning objects. Its implementation we just haven't really worked out. Any questions of that? That's always hard to explain, actually. That's 4 models. So what were they again? We have free and open courses. That's just the whole course page. We have the instructional content, mostly video-based. It's a lot of SlideShare stuff too, a lot of PowerPoints and stuff like that. Content, so our content development, of which very little of our work is content development, but we follow that free and open, so free and open formats even, so we use the media wikis, we use the technology behind the media wikis, the print-to-book features and things like that, and sort of take on a masochistic relationship with the whole forcing us to use August formats and ODF formats and all that stuff, which is good in the long term, I suppose, but in the here and now practical, just creates a whole other headache with teachers who just want to get it done. Okay, the stories. I'll jump back to the stories. Okay. I'm using these stories, and these are based on truth. Well, the first 2 are. So in my office, we occupy our time a lot with teacher training. So that's those facilitating online, flexible learning, composing education resources courses that I showed earlier on. Okay, so that's no different, I don't think, to any other training that we do in the Polytechnic. It's just as relevant to how we teach business administration as it's just teaching, okay? Unfortunately, in the institution, it's kind of seen as different for some reason. I guess because teachers don't want to consider themselves students for some reason. But the teacher needing professional development at low risk and maximum flexibility. In our organisation, and I reckon it must be the same in all, is each teacher is given a nominal budget for professional development. In our institution, it's about 1,500 New Zealand dollars. It's nothing. It certainly doesn't get you here, and barely gets you, no, it wouldn't even get you to Australia for a conference, including accommodation and all those other costs. Really, all it pays for is our local courses, the ones I showed you here, which have an enrollment fee of about $400, I think. So they can afford to do 3 courses over the course of a year. 2 of them are compulsory, and that's something to do with the Maori cultural sensitivity issues, honouring the treaty, things like that, first aid, fire warden, things like that. So the compulsory is basically spent. So, and the other part is if they start a course and drop out past the 2 or 3 week cutoff point, they don't get their money back. So if they start a course and realise it's beyond me, I don't have time, or the head teacher just gave them a whole nother load of work and they can't finish it, then they've spent their professional development budget, no return, no refund. So this is why we need that maximum flexibility, or that low risk is what I'm really talking about here. In that open course, they just land on the wiki, they can see everything that's involved, and in it says the next facilitated course starts and ends at this date. So they have 2 choices right up there. They can wait till the next facilitated course and participate freely. They have free access to the teacher who's facilitating, they haven't paid anything up front, or they can just start doing the activity straight away. Now the reason that we let them freely access the teacher and the communication and everything like that is because we think, and it's shown, I think in our experiences, that the more people we have in these courses, the better. If we only relied on who enrolls has access, then we have small groups of 6. And based on the online communication of no more than 10% engagement, we don't even have 1 person engaging in the course. So we need 20 to 100 people. 20 will give us 2 people engaging in the course, 100 will give us 10 people. And 100 is about the manageable limit. Based on the facilitating online communities experience last year, we had almost 100, and wow, it was tough but doable. 10-week course, 5 hours per week was the workload of both the students and the facilitators, was the budget. Okay, so that's the first story, is that the people can access the course entirely for free. When they pay, they get committed learning support. A regular phone call, how are you going? A priority in the feedback chain. So when they post to their blog, the priority feedback from the facilitator in terms of comment and feedback is the formally enrolled first, and then spare time in terms of 5 hours a week goes to those who are informally enrolled. So it's a kind of trying to encourage a nurturing relationship between the facilitator and the people participating in the course, trying to get more people to consider the value of formally enrolling not in a marketing sense, to honestly realize it. Do you need formal, would you benefit from formal accreditation and certification for this course? Will it result in a pay rise or better conditions or things like that? And does this content meet your needs? If so, you might want to formally enroll, either now, halfway through, or later for recognition of prior learning later on. The RPL process is proving very successful. RPL recognition of prior learning. Which this is an interesting story. Emerging professionals seeking recognition, migration, and employment. So naturally, we're on a wiki, it's international, we have international interests. One particular challenging experience has been a young fellow from Pakistan. This guy knows a lot about social media, about open source production standards, open source software, open source formats, has a lot of opinion about it, has a very interesting opinion coming from a Muslim perspective. And so he's taken advantage of this open access and using up a hell of a lot of our time. But it's good, it's valuable to us, because what we're realizing is that he can't afford our tuition fee. But when we don't ask that of him. But what we do give him is a certificate of attendance. It's just, probably most people have it, but you have attended and formally participated in this course. And it has some currency with our later assessors, the recognition of prior learning, that interview process of what have you done, how have you learned, and all that sort of stuff. So we write it in such a way that points to the evidence to make that assessor's job efficient, that later assessor. That could be 2 or 3 years down the track. And we give that for free. The other interesting point is that I wonder how it, and this is where it gets into the untrue land, I wonder how it will work. He wants to migrate because to New Zealand or to Sweden, he just wants to get out of Pakistan because he doesn't have the peer local network for employment opportunities in social media and he wants to go to a country where he does have those opportunities. So this might relate to, in New Zealand, we have a skilled migrant program. We identify skill shortages and we target migration on that. So if his skills fit that need, we could probably go and talk to our skilled migrant program and see how we can link in this assessment loop that we're setting up without cost. We're just setting up the assessment loop so that if he does find a sponsor employer, we can ask that sponsor employer to cover the assessment fee by showing the certificate's attendance. He doesn't have to pay anything. We're just helping him set up, put all the things in place for him to just say, here, can you assess me now? And he's sponsored assessment. And we then get our money because we do the assessment. And eventual employment. Okay, that's a half-true story because we haven't seen it through to here. There's a lot of issues. A lot of issues. The skilled migrant program doesn't recognise any Pakistani qualifications, and he starts to get a perspective that New Zealand administration is racist. That doesn't help his progress, etc. That's the human element always comes into it. Young school leaver needing a head start into an apprenticeship or trade. Think of those cooking videos. If the ingredients were there with the methods. The young kid had jack of school, as we all do, who just wants to get out, get a trade. The careers advisor is anxious because there is no work in this climate, doesn't want this kid going out and dropping out, but sees the videos on YouTube, contacts the Polytechnic and say, can I help this kid do your activities based on your videos and instruction media, using our resources, and getting to the point where he's going to do your assessments, and we recognise those assessments and give him a head start in his course when he does eventually leave our school, come to the Polytechnic. So it's kind of trying to position our resources so that we help schools get their kids down that path with an advantage to either finding an apprenticeship or a master to run their apprenticeship or to sponsor their apprenticeship, as well as, and the incentive to that is that they've progressed further down the Polytech's training rather than just starting at year 0 like everyone else does. So the open resources make that story possible. There's the hurdles of those teachers, our teachers, putting their ingredients out there free of charge and thinking that that might be beneficial to them. I think they do think it's beneficial. It's their head teacher who doesn't. Okay. Self-employed small business owner needing short courses on specific areas at minimum cost, maximum flexibility, same as the teacher. So the tourism and travel link that was dead. Just looking to see if I can fix that. Whoops. Yeah. Oh. No, I'll forget that. And is there a way I can delete that window? No, you love the Macs. It's always at the opposite end of the screen. Okay. Okay, travel and tourism is set up like that horticulture model that is proving difficult to manage. But increasingly now, and these are now the courses, so they have everything from travel and tourism in the Pacific, tourism enterprises, which is basically managing a small business, or adventure tourism, or things like that. Okay, they've got a whole suite of short courses that run for maybe 10 weeks. So the potential then is for somebody in industry who needs training on how to welcome Chinese tourists. And they have a short course on cultural sensitivity to Chinese tourists. There's suddenly an influx of Chinese tourists coming to Dunedin. The small business wants to get its 1 or 2 employees skilled and ready. They take this short course. And if we follow that other model, where it's free access, free participation, but if you want really intense support, you can pay that fee up front. And we generally do get that fee up front for those who want that. And that's enough to pay for the extra load of carrying the informal, non-paying people who complement that. We need more than 6 people in this course to make it worth anything. So getting more people is actually a learning resource. Okay, those are the 4 stories, and there are more stories, but they kind of illustrate the scope of how we're thinking, I think, with the open education stuff. Sounds promising. There are failures, though. Okay, the policy and support that makes this possible. How's time? Wow, yeah. I know it's when my mouth gets dry, it's sort of the policy and support. This is what made the Polytech famous, I think, is that we implemented a so-called intellectual property policy that said, rather than it was before, it was if you work for the institution and you're making your resources, the institution owns your work. That sucks. That takes away all the motivation. That causes grief and conflict and arguments and people quitting and then taking everything they've made and walking out with it, never to be seen again. Just for bitterness. So we flipped it. We said everybody owns their intellectual property and they manage it. They're responsible for it. So all the referencing, the images they use, it's their liability. They have to fix it. We'll set up the support on how you do that properly, but now everything is your liability. If you use the Otago Polytechnic as a platform to present your work, so you either use our website or our classrooms, our business card, things like that. If you're using us as a kind of label to present your work, then we kind of we encourage you to release that work on a Creative Commons attribution. No non-commercial, no share alike, just Creative Commons attribution. But you realise that there are circumstances in which you can't do that. You might be working with a cultural minority group who is not comfortable with you releasing the work that they've contributed with you. You might be working with a business who has legitimate commercial concern about releasing patents or inventions and things like that, etc., etc. So in that case, you have a cause. You explain why you're restricting and how long you're going to restrict for, and at that time, it's released Creative Commons attribution. That's the policy, both intellectual property policy and copyright policy. But the implementation is different. The marketing department hasn't even heard of this policy. The IT guys don't even know what it is. And so begins the 2 to 3, maybe even 20 years education process of just reading this one policy of hundreds of policies. We all know how policy works. Few people, such as the horticulture chainsaw instructor, what's he going to read a policy on copyright for? He's not. Okay. The other part in the support area is the encouragement to use popular social media. You notice with Wikiversity, Wiki Educator, YouTube, not Otago Polytechnic YouTube, not Otago Polytechnic Wiki. To me, it's a no-brainer. The YouTube is free, you just upload it, and suddenly you've got way more viewers than you ever could have possibly got at YouTube. If I'm looking for a video on how to lay bricks, I go to YouTube. I don't go to Otago Polytechnic /55905. The Google search didn't even register it. Like, it's a no-brainer. But unfortunately, it's the ways in the making of arguing to everyone involved to say, upload it to YouTube. So but the idea is that the copyright policy removes all policy-inspired barriers. It's okay. Creative Commons attribution means anyone can do anything with it. You own it. It's your decision. And we think YouTube is a better place for you to upload your video. Now, it'd be great if we could come up with the software. There's people in this city, in this room probably, who can come up with this software where we have an upload interface that says, I'm uploading this video to YouTube, Internet Archive, New Zealand Archive, New Zealand Library, Otago Polytechnic servers, tick them all, and upload it all. There are a couple of services free that you can use, but they don't include our own institution servers or our own National Archive or National Library. I think if we could have that, that'd be great, because that would handle the risk, obviously, of us putting videos into YouTube and nowhere else. We need somewhere to spread them, especially keep them locally, because the cost of bringing a 10 megabyte video from servers in San Francisco to New Zealand is huge, wherever the YouTube servers are. I know they're not in New Zealand. So it would be great if we could host them locally, so that when a local call is made, we can serve it locally. But I realise there's some issues with privacy in terms of monitoring who's using what, blah, blah, blah. But somebody needs to be working on that, I think. Okay. The other thing is that the majority of our people in our organisation still use the learning management system. We've just moved from from Blackboard to Moodle, and people think this is a great thing. I suppose it's great because we're using open source software and not paying your licenses, but it's still a piece of crap software. And,
how do you really feel?
it's just mind-bogglingly limited. But the thing is, from what I understand, I'm just a lay person. I just dip my toes in everything. I don't go, spend 12 hours or 6 weeks a night trying to understand a piece of software, and then suddenly it reveals its power to me. That sort of thing. But the thing is, understanding that for some reason, which I still haven't come to terms with, some reason people want to use a learning management system. They don't want to use, walk through the street, ask somebody, have you heard of YouTube? Have you heard of Wikipedia? Yes, yes. Have you heard of Moodle? No. Have you heard of Blackboard? No. Okay, we're already at disadvantage. We're going to have to show that person how to use Blackboard and Moodle. But if we're using popular media, we have an advantage. You know how to use YouTube to some extent. You know how to search videos. Do you know how to create a user account, create playlists, tag favorites, make comments, stars, all that sort of stuff, and how to use it to manage your learning, right? Rather than just entertainment or silly videos. So if we're using popular media, we're at an advantage because we don't have to support it so much in terms of showing people how to use it. We don't have to employ someone to maintain the servers. All we do have to do is set up the kind of support needed for the courses specifically. The other thing is that if the teachers, I was going to say, if the teachers for some reason are deciding to use the learning management system, and they're good reasons, say for example, the nursing teachers want privacy. They're talking about ward-specific cases and they want privacy. Now you can still get that privacy not using Moodle, but they think you can only get it with using Moodle. So they want to have their conversations there privately, so they want to use the learning management system. The advice is, though, the content should sit outside. You've just gone from the migration from Blackboard to Moodle. If anything, it should have taught you not to keep the content in the damn system. Put the content out of the system. Next time we go and move from Moodle to whatever, or drop Moodle altogether, because we suddenly running out of money big time, that your content is still safe somewhere. Hopefully you put it on multiple platforms. Hopefully somebody's invented the software we can distribute it. I must be running out of time. Digital, okay, so using social media, popular media sites, that is enhancing our digital network literacy. Our teachers know more about the internet. Our students are learning the internet is more about more than just entertainment. And that complements notions of lifelong learning. And I'll ignore that addressing the disconnect. There's a link there to read that because that's a whole essay. I'll stop because questions are good. Yeah.
Thank you. I really, this is very intimidating. Hi. Thank you. I really appreciate what you have to say about all of this, ways you're trying to use these tools. I guess I was thinking you were introduced to someone who didn't pay any attention, so I just wanted to model that back. I guess I wonder, the question you asked after the keynote yesterday was about how can we be sure we're not continuing communication. So I was a historian before doing this, and I find it fascinating, so I was really interested.
Would you speak louder, please?
Oh, sorry. I will stand up. So, no, it's totally not. I'm sorry to everyone listening. So I guess my question is, you asked about colonization and how can we be sure we're not colonizing. And I guess I hear what you're saying in terms of, and this is, I will connect these things. I hear what you're saying about different cultures in terms of you're working with groups, like, for instance, somebody who doesn't know anything about Wikis. And we have a culture here in this room where we all love Wikis, or we know what they are. And I guess I come to this from the perspective of, when I started working with education technology, I was hired because I knew nothing. The guy was valuable because I knew nothing about it. And that made me able to talk to people who also knew nothing about it. And then they trusted me.
We use the same trick.
Right. So I guess what I'm wondering is, when we talk about things like, you've used stories, and I love that you've used stories to tell this. And so I guess I will just tell a story of what happened while I was sitting here. We were talking about wikis, and then there was a little bit of like sort of laughing because she didn't know what wiki was. And then there was a bunch of guys who were like, yeah. And honestly, there are so many people who don't know about wikis. And you know what? They know a lot of things. And they deserve to be treated in a way that we can like, yeah, I don't know about wikis either. There's a lot of stuff I don't know. Because as soon as we deal with people in that perspective of power, because it's really comfortable to be like, oh yeah, we know about wikis, you idiots. You don't know about them. You know, like, I'm not saying that's what's happening, but it is how it feels.
Absolutely.
Right? And so I guess when we're talking about colonialism and culture and also conflict, I love the C's. But I think if we're going to deal with that kind of stuff and we want to progress and move beyond this, we have to be really conscious of how we're dealing with that kind of conflict. And the best way, I think, is to at least say, you're right, I don't get this. Or, you're right, that doesn't make sense. Like, because that model, which is useful, does not always make sense.
Okay. I think, though, I'm laughing at myself. Although,
right now? Or
yes, definitely. Wikis. I said the same with Moodle. Walk down the street, right? Okay, people have heard of Wikipedia, but you say wiki, stop at wiki.
Yeah.
Heard of wiki, right? Just what you said.
Yeah.
So we're just as guilty as the Moodle evangelists. Yeah, so, and in this crisis of faith, I've written to my blog this post called, what's it called, Myths, Lies and Bullshit.
Yeah.
And it basically says that we're full of shit. Like, people, like, the teacher knows how to use the photocopier, and we haven't worked out a way to enhance that practice. You know, if I was, and we have, in a way, for Wiki, we've written an anatomy and physiology textbook that's producing a book, and the book is getting used. The Wiki's there because that's cool and has functionality, but we produce the book, and the book is really the thing that's getting used.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think I'm definitely guilty of making fun at lay people.
Well, me too.
Yeah.
Like, I totally get it.
But what I think, though, is what you're thinking is it's the idea is by you, it's still a strategy. You're thinking use a strategy to help people understand wikis.
Yeah.
I'm asking wikis of what are they? But perhaps that is not an advancement. Maybe it's a regression to use a wiki.
Sure, but I guess maybe my point is maybe who cares about the wiki? It's just it's the concept of something new that someone has to learn that makes them feel vulnerable.
Yeah,
right?
okay.
That's the scary part, and that's where power comes in, and that's where colonization continues.
Yeah.
That's my point.
Yeah, and how much is this technology stuff a bigger colonization? Look at the money in this room.
I work a lot. I'm at Otago College in Kelowna, and I love my welders and my chefs because they're a different culture. So I very much approach them. I don't talk tech talk. I say, wouldn't it be nice if there was some way to show your students how to do this? And I let them come up with, well, yeah, wouldn't it be good if there was a video and where could we put it? And we go through that process. So I don't bring in the terms till the very, very end. So I love hanging out in the trades wings.
But so, what do you do? So I'm an impatient guy. So when that guy, who we love for those reasons, starts entering onto my turf, talking about copyright like he knows about it but has no idea about it, and he's saying, but I need to protect my IP. He doesn't even know what IP stands for. Now I can't make fun again, but it's that sensation I get that you're starting to tell me how to do my job. So put it on YouTube. I'm telling you it's better. When are you going to respect my expertise? Because I'm certainly going to respect your expertise when you're telling me how to start a chainsaw. Okay, fair enough. There's bloody life risking stuff. that sort of thing.
It's a negotiation as you work.
It is, and I'm obviously too inexperienced to work that way, and I'm learning fast, and hence that crisis of faith, right? That you can't use the lingo. I need to say, New Zealand has 70% of the population is not connected to broadband. So I'm from Australia actually, and I come into New Zealand. First of all, I'm dealing with, you're from Australia, don't tell us what to do. Using the internet, and they're not. Any more?
Warren Quayle at the Basque University. I just like to say if you have to teach people in New Zealand how to use on, that says a lot.
safely.
I'm not too bothered about people making fun. You make fun of whoever you like. Make fun of you. But what I would also say is we have over 30,000 students who use Moodle, and not one of them has received any Moodle training. And if somebody's saying that it's harder to use Moodle than to upload a video on YouTube, I don't think they've ever done it, because if you've done it, you know, and it's not particularly difficult to upload a movie on YouTube, but Moodle is not that particularly difficult to use either.
Okay, so for those who couldn't hear, over the other side there, the idea of this, the challenge was that it's not hard to use Moodle. It's as easy as using YouTube. Personally, and this is something I'm struggling with when Jimbo talks about the success of...
I love that you called it Jimbo.
Can we all call you that?
Right, okay. Groovy talks about using WordPress and the success that it's huge. And I'm just sitting here scratching my head going, what is it about Americans and Canadians? They seem to have this literacy laid out before that people taking up these tools. Because in New Zealand, you know, we spend hours and hours and hours and hours and hours showing people how to make a hyperlink, and it doesn't switch. It's not because New Zealand don't, it's because 70% of the population is not experienced with broadband internet. So the whole thing is hampered from the very go, I think. But I think there's also something about North American. When I say North American, I mean the continent that includes Canada, so that depends. But there might be something in the culture set that it's okay to express yourself quite loudly, to write on the internet and stuff. I've always found that when we had student exchanges, the Americans who came to Australia were just wonderfully expressive and confident to stand up in front of class and do show and tell, and I'm just scared shitless. And this kid was just handling it really well. So maybe there's something in the psyche there.
Wait, what's the nature of your crisis of faith? Is it OER? Is it teaching and technology? What's the nature of it?
I have to reread that post next slide. It's partly the copyright. It has no real bearing. And here's the imperialism, or the colonialism. Before I arrived, and probably before any of you guys arrived in your institution starting harping on about copyright, nobody cared about copyright. We were just copying and putting it up there, Google image search, that goes in my PowerPoint, unattributed, blah, blah, blah. And it worked, it was effective, and it was efficient, very time-saving. So now there are two types of people who challenge that. There's the copyright royalty gatherer who comes in and says, right, now you pay me this, because I'm going to do an audit on everything you've done, you owe me this much money. And then there's the freedom fighter who comes in trying to make a job for himself, saying, you need to understand copyright because this is whole free culture over here that you can use. But now I've just effectively stopped the efficiency of the production. I've made the person self-conscious, I've introduced a whole new dimension to quality, etc., creating a job for myself, definitely, but making their job a whole lot harder. And so, you know, it's the process of walking into a photocopier with a library book, putting it down, bang, 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 30 copies, 15 minutes before class. We're a long way short of that.
Yeah, that's just part of the media literacy part of it, and awareness part of it. I think in North America, with so many people using the internet, they're just exposed to it so much that that's how they learn it, just by using it and doing it. And the more that they start using it and learning it and using them, the less obstacles that you'll have to face.
Also, but there's that introverted culture in New Zealand. We call it tall poppy syndrome. Australia has it even worse. You start showing yourself above everyone else. It's that convict heritage, I think. You're with us, you're not with us.
So I hate to do this. It's the worst part. Is having to cut off. We want to make sure people get to lunch. Make sure you grab Leigh later. It's definitely worth talking to.